Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something I find absolutely fascinating, the flex fuel revolution. I'm really thrilled to have you here because we're going to break down the data, the engineering, and the sheer ingenuity behind flexible fuel vehicles, or FFVs. We'll see exactly how these highly adaptable engines are completely changing the global automotive landscape.
Okay, think about this for just a second. What if your car had like an omnivorous digestive system? Basically, an iron stomach, right? See, most standard internal combustion engines are strict carnivores. They only eat one highly specific diet, usually standard unleaded gasoline, and if you feed them anything else, well, they get sick and they break down. But flex fuel engines, they're true omnivores. They are literally engineered to adapt instantly, right on the fly, to whatever blend of fuel you decide to feed them at the pump. It's pretty amazing.
All right, so here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the global landscape. Then we'll decode the fuel blends themselves. After that, we'll peek under the hood. And finally, we'll wrap up with engineering the future. Let's jump right into part one, the global landscape. So, by definition, a flexible fuel vehicle, an FFV, is an alternative fuel vehicle with an internal combustion engine that's designed to run on more than one fuel. But here's the absolute kicker. Those different fuels are stored in the exact same common tank. It's not magic, but it kind of feels like it. A specialized fuel composition sensor basically detects the exact proportion of gasoline and ethanol in the tank, and then it automatically adjusts the fuel injection and the spark timing to perfectly adapt the combustion chamber. Now, I want to bust a super common myth right here because people mix this up all the time. They confuse flex fuel with bi-fuel. Flex fuel means everything is mixed together in one single tank and the engine adapts on the fly. Bi-fuel vehicles, on the other hand, have two totally separate tanks. Picture a normal gas tank plus a completely separate pressurized cylinder in the trunk for compressed natural gas. A bi-fuel car just switches back and forth between those two sources. It doesn't dynamically burn a mixed fluid the way a flex fuel engine does. And this tech isn't just a niche thing. It has a massive global footprint. We're talking around 60 million commercially available FFVs globally. Just look at the sheer volume in Brazil. Over 30 million light vehicles and 6 million motorcycles, and they're running on everything from E20 all the way up to pure E100 ethanol. The US is right behind them with 27 million vehicles optimized mostly for E85, alongside about 1.6 million in Canada, and a really strong European presence, led by Sweden. Which brings us to part two, decoding the blends. So let's talk about E85. This is essentially the gold standard blend for North American and European flex fuel vehicles. E85 stands for 85% anhydrous ethanol mixed with a 15% fraction of standard gasoline. Now, the underlying technology totally exists to run on pure 100% ethanol, but the engines in these specific Northern Hemisphere markets are optimally tuned for this 83 to 85% sweet spot. But you might be wondering, why keep that 15% gasoline in there at all? Well, the answer lies in what engineers call the cold start challenge. Frankly, ethanol just doesn't like to ignite when it's cold outside. When temperatures drop below 11 degrees Celsius, that's about 52 degrees Fahrenheit, high ethanol content causes some pretty major engine starting problems. To counter this, markets have to dynamically reduce their blends in the winter. So the US drops its winter fuel down to E70 and Sweden drops to E75. In Brazil, where they routinely run pure E100, older vehicles actually had to use a small secondary gasoline reservoir just to get the engine started on chilly mornings below 15 degrees Celsius. Luckily, better flex motors came out around 2009 and pretty much eliminated the need for that extra tank. All right, let's move on to part three, under the hood. Now, to make all of this actually work, you need an intricate web of mechanical components. A flex fuel engine might look exactly like a standard engine from the outside, but the real secret sauce is the upgraded internal hardware required to basically digest this mixed fuel. See, because ethanol has vastly different chemical properties and a totally different energy content compared to gasoline, you can't just pour it into an unmodified car. It demands specific physical upgrades. For starters, ethanol can be pretty corrosive, so these vehicles are outfitted with specially engineered metal or flexible fuel lines. Then there's the fuel pump. It has to be beefed up to handle the alcohol. Next, a specialized fuel injection system is dropped in to manage the entirely different flow rates. And finally, the whole thing breathes through an advanced exhaust system equipped with a three-way catalyst, which carefully manages the unique emissions that come from burning alcohol. But the real hero here, it's the brain of the operation, the engine control module, or ECM. All that upgraded hardware we just talked about relies entirely on this ECM.
Because ethanol has a much higher oxygen content than gasoline, the ECM has to be specially calibrated. It acts as the ultimate supervisor, dynamically monitoring the fuel mixture and tweaking the ignition timing in literal milliseconds. It effectively safeguards the engine from abuse, catching and fixing problems before they even happen.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 4, Engineering the Future.
To keep pushing this tech forward around the world, we have to actively train a whole new generation of engineers. Enter the Automotive Skills Development Council. They've established a highly specific syllabus for this called the Foundation Course in Flex Fuel Engine Design. Under the unit code ASC/N8020, this rigorous NSQF Level 5.5 qualification is completely mapped out to prepare aspiring automotive professionals for this fast-evolving market.
Inside this course, engineers go through intense training. They don't just study one type of fuel. They have to run simulations on every single ratio, from E5 all the way up to E85. They map out how each specific blend alters the calorific value and the octane rating. They measure the resulting shifts in engine power, torque, and overall fuel economy. They even measure NVH, which stands for noise, vibration, and harshness, meaning they actually study how adding a different fuel physically changes the way the engine shakes and sounds while you're driving it. And all of this feeds right into the mechanical design lifecycle. Engineers kick things off with 3D CAD modeling to map the exact part geometries, as well as the mass and energy flow. Then they use finite element meshing to simulate extreme stress in a digital environment. The whole goal is to calculate the optimal factor of safety. They do all of this in software to ensure the parts are perfectly balanced, lightweight, cost-effective, and completely corrosion-free before a single physical part is ever built.
But of course, digital simulations are only half the battle, right? Next comes the real-world testing and calibration. It's basically a high-tech how-it's-made process, taking a part from a computer screen to a brutal physical test. First, they calibrate the engine control units for precise spark and injection timing. Then, the physical mechanical parts go through intense validation stages, moving from initial design into product testing and all the way to pre-production. Finally, these engines are bolted onto test rigs, strapped down to chassis dynamometers, and taken out to the proving grounds for rigorous user trials. They literally have to prove they can survive absolutely everything the real world throws at them.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought. As engineering education continues to push the absolute boundaries of mixed fuel combustion, the vehicles of tomorrow are only going to get smarter, cleaner, and way more adaptable. So, what alternative fuel blend will your next vehicle be digesting? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope you're walking away with a crystal clear picture of the invisible, omnivorous technology that's driving our future. Catch you next time.